government of the Kingdom of Swaziland. It is my most pleasant duty to extend
Africa's oldest monarch, 83-year-old King Sobhuza II of Swaziland.
honored guests who have been very kind.
These celebrations in September 1981 marked King Sobhuza's Diamond Jubilee, 60 years on the throne. And they drew guests from across Africa and from Commonwealth countries beyond. Today, King Sobhuza and his tiny landlocked country are in the news again, this time at the center of a political row involving Swaziland's powerful neighbor, white-ruled South Africa. King Sobhuza rules over a nation of only 500,000 people. The only African country smaller than Swaziland is Gambia. Now the South African government has made the king an offer he can scarcely refuse. The gift of large areas of South African territory totaling some 8,000 square kilometers. At the same time, the population of the kingdom would be more than doubled, with the king becoming responsible for all Africans of Swazi origin, even those living in homelands or in urban South Africa. There appears to be nothing in the proposals then to upset the people of Swaziland, a reunited people and national territory increased by 1/3. But the strongest of objections have been raised by other Africans involved in this unique land deal. The areas involved are, to the north, Kangwane, at present the designated black homeland for ethnic Swazis outside Swaziland. And to the southeast, Ingwavuma, northernmost part of the Zulu homeland, KwaZulu. This is the view on Swaziland's border with Ingwavuma. One of the most attractive features of the land deal to Swaziland is the prospect of gaining access via Ingwavuma to a port facility on the Indian Ocean, something tremendously important for a landlocked country. And Swaziland is by no means embarrassed about accepting the land because it has claims going back over 100 years to this part of Africa. Swazi kings, so it's claimed, ruled here in the 19th century. Then came British colonists, wars, and imposed settlements, and the drawing up of artificial borders which have survived to this day. Another unclear factor is the proportions of the different ethnic groups who live and farm today in this underdeveloped and sparsely populated region of Africa. Some anthropologists say the indigenous people are the Tembe Tonga, who also spread northwards across the border into Mozambique. These are interspersed with Zulus, who together make up some 90% of the population. The remaining 10%, according to this analysis, are made up of a variety of tribes and clans, including Swazis. On a purely ethnic basis, then, Swaziland's claims to the territory are weak. Historically, they have a better case, though one rejected by the Zulus. But it is South Africa, not Swaziland, that's taking the initiative in this affair. And the government has been claiming the right to alter national boundaries by giving away land to independent neighboring states if it so wishes. It's prepared to do so even against the wishes of the people living in those territories. And that's what is causing all the trouble. The future of whites in Ingwavuma is a comparatively small problem. There are only 12. Among them, wholesaler David Bartle Moore, the 4th generation of his family to live here. South Africa did start negotiations to buy out the white businessmen, but compensation offers have reportedly since been withdrawn. The whites' future remains unclear. But compensation is an option not being offered to the 70,000 or so other inhabitants. The people of Ingwavuma are not entirely powerless, however. Lawyers representing KwaZulu have been fighting the proposed land deal in the South African courts. In fact, the Supreme Court in Durban has ruled 3 times that the Pretoria government acted illegally in assuming control of the Ingwavuma region and its inhabitants as a clear prelude to handing the territory over to King Sobhuza. This legal wrangle could go on for months, although it's possible the government could still force through the land deal in defiance of all the critics. KwaZulu, a semi-autonomous homeland, has only a token internal security force, like this local patrol in Ingwavuma town. But Zulu leader, Chief Buthelezi, has pledged a non-violent campaign of civil disobedience to resist the land deal. He's taking his case to several black African leaders and possibly to the Organization of African Unity. Buthelezi has declared scornfully that there are only 48 Swazis in the whole of Ingwavuma compared to 90,000 Zulus. For him, the Swazi historical claims are absurd.
There are no historical claims. I must say, first of all, that Swaziland itself, for many, many years, paid tributes themselves to the Zulu king. That even the present king of Swaziland, King Sobhuza II, has paid tributes to the Zulu kings, And I'm not guessing this, I know this, because they were conquered by the Zulus themselves in 1853. And since then, they were actually under the suzerainty of the Zulu kingdom. There's no question about this. But the people, in fact, in Ingwavuma are not Swazis. I mean, this is well documented by professors of anthropology, of history, and also by former administrators in this area, former chief native commissioners who have administered the area. And there's no question whatsoever that these people are not Swazis, and they were never Swazis, and that they were never ruled by any Swazi king ever before, either this one or any of his predecessors.
There appears little love lost then between the Swazis and the Zulus, who both claim this region as their own. Giving the area to Swaziland has also been opposed by some whites, not only because South Africa would cede mineral rights, but because it would also lose one of the richest parts of its natural heritage. Conservationists say there are hundreds of species of flora and fauna here not found anywhere else in the country, and the richest bird life in South Africa. Ecologists fear that the proposed deal could also cause new migrations of people. This could permanently alter the lifestyle of the local inhabitants, said to be the people in all of South Africa who live most in harmony with their environment. These objections were being put to South Africa's Department of Cooperation and Development. It's this department which has been most closely involved in the Greater Swaziland Plan, said to have been conceived by the minister in charge, Dr. Piet Koornhof.
There will be some imperfections. But about the fact
he has been closely involved with the South African government's continuing search for a lasting answer to its race problems, a search which has recently led towards constitutional change and limited power sharing with non-whites.
To my way of thinking, there can be not the slightest shadow of doubt.
The power-sharing plans, just approved unanimously by the ruling National Party, aim to restructure the present all-white parliament into 3 separate chambers for whites, coloreds, and Indians respectively. There would be no representation for blacks, but as Prime Minister P.W. Botha insists, relations must be improved with the black homelands granted independence by Pretoria.
Much progress has been made in giving substance to the concept of a confederation of Southern African states. And as I have repeatedly stated in recent months and on various occasions, multilateral cooperation between the Republic of South Africa, Transkei, Bophuthatswana, Venda and Ciskei has been rapidly expanding and indeed continues to expand in an increasing number of fields. This cooperation is growing qualitatively as well as quantitatively, and in order to deal with all the diverse activities involved, a number of specialist committees and working groups have been established for the specific services and disciplines in which we are already cooperating.
Blacks number more than 70% of South Africa's total population, including those 4 homelands whose independence has not been recognized outside South Africa. These people in a shanty town outside Johannesburg are among the millions of urban blacks drawn to the cities by the prospect of employment. Many stay here without work or residency permits. They run the risk of being sent to the distant black homeland designated to their particular ethnic group. One such homeland is Ciskei, designated to the Xhosas. The government critics say the homelands are being used as a dumping ground for surplus black labor and for the old and sick. In reaction, 6 proposed homelands, including KwaZulu and Kangwane, have been resisting the offer of independence taken up by the other 4. Now, by incorporating homeland territory into another state, Swaziland, South Africa loses some territory, but also loses responsibility for around 1 million blacks. To many National Party members, this seems a fair deal. Further up the east coast, the capital of Mozambique, Maputo. Since independence from Portugal, Mozambique has had a Marxist leader, President Machel. He has proved no friend of the Pretoria government and has given support to the African National Congress, the black opposition banned in South Africa. It was a situation that South Africa found intolerable. It sent an elite squad across the border and into the suburbs of Maputo early in 1981 against the ANC. The targets, 3 homes where ANC officers and guerrillas were living. The attack was carried out with rockets, machine guns, and bazookas. 11 ANC men and 1 South African died. It was a daring but dangerous raid, and it also showed that the South Africans take the ANC threat seriously. They have good reason to. Six months before the raid, the ANC carried out its most spectacular sabotage attack, blowing up the big Sasol oil refinery, South Africa's much-prized coal-to-oil complex. Would Swaziland be expected to turn against the ANC if it is given more land? Chief Buthelezi again.
I think that there must be something in it, because I think the whole attitude of the Swazi government to some of the ANC insurgents, judging by some of the cases that have been heard in recent times against them in the Swazi courts, indicate that they have suddenly developed, adopted a rather hostile attitude, I think, towards ANC as such. And I think that there could be something, because the Prime Minister of South Africa, Mr. Botha, is very much obsessed with the so-called communist onslaught. And therefore, they see President Machel as an agent for this onslaught. And therefore, in their equation, they think that if they have some kind of buffer state between President Machel's territory of Mozambique and South Africa, that will sort of avoid, or rather prevent the incursions of the so-called insurgents of ANC or any other insurgents for that matter. But I think it's childish myself, because I don't think that judging by what I've seen in many borders, like for instance in Namibia and so on, that it does make any difference at all.
So Chief Buthelezi agrees that Swaziland would be expected to help South Africa keep out ANC guerrillas if the land deal goes through. But Swaziland would also become the recognized home for 750,000 Swazi South Africans. In return, besides increasing its land mass and population, Swaziland would get access to the sea. It's reported that the South Africans have already started driving a new road through Ingwavuma to Kosi Bay on the Indian Ocean. A new rail link southwards to South Africa is also said to be under construction, almost certainly with South African money. Swaziland remains a poor country. Tourism is its main source of foreign exchange, and the majority of visitors are South Africans on weekend visits. Political power resides with King Sobhuza and the executive of the Swazi National Council. No political parties are allowed under the new constitution. As the king is said to be extremely eager to extend his kingdom, there would be no delay in implementing a land deal from this side. The older generation in particular would support him. There would be more prestige for Swaziland, and at the same time they could welcome home their blood brothers from the racial injustices of the big southern neighbor. Among the younger, more educated Swazis, though, there is the feeling that the deal would not be a good one for Swaziland. It would be helping South Africa in its suspected aim of pushing its unwanted black citizens out across its borders and denying them forever the hope of gaining political power in the land where they were born. A third group of citizens takes a more pragmatic view. Yes, it would be marvelous to get part of Ingwavuma and a port facility for imports and exports. But why bother with the Kangwane tribal area on the northern and western borders, a place of scenic beauty, but otherwise an economic wasteland? A majority of South African Swazi chiefs are reported to oppose the land deal, too. They wish to remain South Africans and fight for a democratic future in the Republic, as does Kangwane's executive officer, Enos Mabuza.
I'm opposed to the land transfer of Kangwane to Swaziland. But what's most important is that the people I lead, that is the South Africans who are of Swazi extract, are also totally opposed to the whole land deal with Swaziland.
Do all the Swazi people share this view?
Certainly it is shared by all the people, and they've even shown that by suggesting to the government that a referendum should be held on the matter, and the South African government is very reluctant to hold a referendum because they are aware that the people will vote overwhelmingly against the incorporation of the land to Swaziland, which will go together with the people.
Why is the South African government doing this?
The reasons are obvious, although there could still be some sinister reasons which we do not know. First of all, the South African government wants to expedite its plan to remove as many blacks from South Africa as possible, along the same lines as they've granted independence to Venda, Bophuthatswana, Ciskei, and Transkei, so that the blacks in this country should not pose a political threat to political white power in South Africa. That's one basic reason. And also, they do not want us to have a share in the wealth and prosperity of this country, which we have also helped to build. And we feel we are entitled to it. That is why they are granting backdoor independence, so that we can all the time be dependent on South Africa, be dependent on the aid of South Africa, and not participate in the wealth of the land of our birth.
Apart from the Swaziland deal, would Mr. Mabuza ever accept being part of an independent Swazi homeland?
We won't accept being part of another independent homeland, and we have told this to Mr. P.W. Botha. We regard ourselves as South Africans first and foremost, and our duty it is to strive for a non-racial and just society in South Africa, where all the members of the different population groups, irrespective of color, race, or creed, can participate in the decision-making processes of this country.
That you are Zulus, I therefore call upon you to face...
So opposition from many different quarters to the plan to create a greater Swaziland. And opposition most of all from the Zulus, the warrior race who have dominated other tribes and who defied Boer settlers and British colonists. This huge rally in the KwaZulu capital, Ulundi, on the last day of July, gave their answer to the land deal proposals.
emakhosini akwaZulu kusukela nasekuqaleni kweminyakeni yawo-800 edlule.
King Goodwill Zwelithini himself proudly reviewed his warriors, who are part of a tribe 5.5 million strong. Alone, the Zulus outnumber all the whites in South Africa, and they are in no mood to see a large chunk of Zulu land given away to a tribe they regard as their inferior. It would take a brave man to argue with them. And yet South Africa, in spite of all the opposition and its legal setbacks, seems determined to press ahead with its plan. Would its implementation be another success for Pretoria's independent black homelands policy? And could Chief Buthelezi and his Inkatha movement do anything to stop it?
Well, actually, it's not a question of stopping it. What I can say is that South Africa is armed, you know, and Swaziland is armed, but as you can see from the meeting that you attended today, will not be deterred by that. Clearly, what I mean, therefore, is that we'll resist, and since we believe in a non-violent strategy, we'll resist it, because some people seem to assume that non-violent strategy means, in fact, acquiescence, and it means not doing anything. But in this case, I'm yet to, you know, I can almost swear that no Swazi can ever come to Ingwavuma and rule over those people there. I mean, it just cannot happen. I'm not threatening when I say so. I'm gauging this by the anger of the people, which you gauge yourself today at the meeting, and which is all over the place. It's an anger which solidified our people. It's unified people more than ever before, and the people's anger has to be seen to be believed.
It has been suggested that implementing the plan would be a success for South Africa's homelands policy. Does Buthelezi agree with this?
I don't think that is. I think that's wrong, because the Zulu people by themselves, even if all the other so-called homelands accepted, quote-unquote, the so-called homelands policy, if the Zulus alone stand out, in fact, we'll still be more than whites in this country. And therefore, it's not it can't be comprehended or interpreted, shall I say, as the success of that policy, because there's no question that we Zulus are against the policy and that they will never accept it under any circumstances. So therefore, it's really very spurious to conclude that this is the success of their policy. Well, they've succeeded to get rid of some of our people, but that is not success at all. Because the majority of black people in this country, that is both in the urban and rural areas, you know, are against the homelands policy.
And what are the feelings within Buthelezi's Inkatha movement now?
In fact, the anger has been trebled by the Ingwavuma issue. I'm honestly terrified of what may happen. Because you see, people in anger can do all kinds of things. Because when people are angry, they're not as perceptive as people who are not angry. Now, since the Ingwavuma thing took place, that anger has been trebled, in fact. And I just worry for this country. If the government doesn't back down on this issue, then God help South Africa.
The Zulus hail their king and chief as if they had won a victory in battle. What they have done is to show that the Zulus are determined to cause no end of trouble if the land deal goes ahead. It's possible that South Africa will ride roughly over all opposition, as it has done in the past. Or perhaps a compromise settlement will be reached after top-level talks between King Goodwill and Prime Minister Botha. But to persist in ceding the whole of Ingwavuma to Swaziland could, with the Zulus in their present mood, be courting disaster.